Okay, I've been going over my thoughts and own research of the Chinese EVs. I've read all your comments and been interacting with many of you too. And listening to your feedback and taking it all in, I genuinely find it invaluable and always appreciate you giving me your usually very good points. My ultimate objective is to talk through potential scenarios that may occur and see if we can work out which are the most likely. I feel like there is just a lot of disagreement in what I've been saying though. All I'm doing is pointing out perspectives that I haven't heard from any other sides. Just because I'm not fitting the narrative that you already believe or that other credible people have been saying, that doesn't mean you shouldn't at least hear some of the points. This is investing. It's important to maintain an open mind at all times. That having been said, in regards to Tesla, I never once said that the Chinese EVs will be taking any of Tesla's market share. According to my research, despite how cheap China may get things done, well, Tesla can still produce their cars at a much lower cost, at least like for like. And they can do it at a profit. And when Tesla launched their compact $25,000 model, then it will be a very tough price point for the Chinese to undercut. I repeat, this is not me just trying to say that I think Teslas are better than the Chinese EVs. No one comes close to Tesla. Tesla is vastly superior in absolutely every possible way, and Tesla do not need to worry about anyone taking any of their market share. The only rational reason to buy a Chinese EV over a Tesla is because Tesla's waiting lists could get too long for a lot of people to wait. And said consumer has to have a BEV, and a plug-in hybrid is not going to be enough for them. Or someone wanted a cheap EV and could live with perhaps 150 or so miles of range, and although we do have zero emissions movement, it may not be enough to motivate the typical consumer. But if gas prices went through the roof, then perhaps they might find a bit more encouragement to possibly make the move to fully electric, even with such small range. So I wouldn't rule that out as a possibility. Again, I'm not trying to say Chinese EVs simply won't make it in the US. I'm just trying to point out, in my opinion, what it might take in order for them to make it. And some of these scenarios are not as likely as some people think. I myself was disappointed with my findings, to be honest. I had more hope for the transition of EVs. I thought the Chinese were really making more impact, as that is what we generally hear. But as to Tesla shareholders, we're safe from Chinese EVs as a competitor. For those of you who say they will catch up, well, I find that unlikely. But even if they did catch up to where Tesla was today, Tesla would be at another level tomorrow. It's a moving target. The Chinese might be able to get into some markets with lower cost vehicles that, remember, don't make a profit still, that Tesla is not already established in. Also, bear in mind, this Chinese EV series has mainly been focusing on the US, as that was the narrative that the Chinese EVs are going to storm in the US just like the Japanese cars did in the 70s. I've explained how this is a different scenario and given plenty of reasons as to why, but history does often not repeat like people think. I've also gone through the best-selling Chinese EVs and pointed out how many of them don't even count, as they're not legally able to be sold in the US, or are plug-in hybrids, or they have about 50 miles of range, which simply isn't suitable for the US. This is a big deal. The numbers are being distorted. No one else seems to be mentioning this either. There are a lot fewer Chinese EVs than people think. And of these Chinese EVs, only about 10% of them are suitable for the US market. But the majority of these are going to be sold in China anyway. And then the exports will have many other countries to go to other than just the US. As in, there are not many Chinese EVs that could be exported to the US anyway, which would affect economies of scale. Also, all these cars are going to be sedans, as the Chinese crossovers, what with them being bigger and heavier and still using LFP batteries, get even less range, which makes it extra hard again to compete in that category, which happens to be the biggest selling segment of cars in the US. Of course, pickup trucks would be even harder for the same reason, and if they use nickel batteries for more range, then they can't ramp up that battery supply. The advantage the Chinese have are abundant LFP batteries at low cost. I think about the BYD Han a lot, as I believe that is basically one of the only Chinese EVs that might be suitable to some of the US market, but it is incredibly slow, except for the performance version, which uses nickel batteries, is very expensive and can't be ramped up. So if the Chinese were to make it into the US, then they would only be in the sedan and perhaps compact market, leaving out the largest market segment, crossovers and SUVs. Yes, NIO does offer them with a good range, but they have good range because they use nickel batteries, which again, they can't ramp up fast enough. Also, I should address the Polestar as the other Chinese acquisition along with MG. Well, the Polestar doesn't count because it's using nickel batteries, not LFP, which means, again, it simply can't ramp up as fast as legacy autos can, as they haven't been building their own factories for nickel batteries. Remember, nickel batteries are very scarce. All manufacturers who want nickel batteries have realised they have to spend billions on making their own battery factories. The other option is using CATL's LFP batteries, which are far more abundant and much lower cost. There'll be enough LFP batteries for these manufacturers, but the issue is you end up with cars that according to market research, are not sufficient for the US market in performance and range, hence why the US legacy autos are still starting their own nickel battery factories. Yes, XPeng has had tremendous growth of about 200% year over year, but they produce 1/10 of what Tesla does, and Tesla is also about to see some tremendous growth next year. This doesn't mean that XPeng will continue to grow 200% next year. Remember, we haven't seen anyone else hit volume production yet. Do you really think XPeng is going to be the magic manufacturer that finally does? The XPeng might look like it has a good range, but they use nickel batteries for their longer range models. This simply means they can't scale up. The advantage of the Chinese EVs is they are not battery constrained, as they're using LFP batteries. That is their advantage. They're cheap and abundant, but result in poor range and performance. The long-range XPeng vehicles are using nickel batteries, so they can't scale up. The XPeng P7 LFP has under 205 miles of range EPA. This may be suitable for some people in the US, but it's nearly $40,000 in China without subsidies. Then add on to that the cost of importing it into the US with tariffs. It's still a lot more expensive than a Tesla standard range Model 3, and the Tesla has a lot more range and performance. But perhaps there is a budget market I'm not thinking about. Maybe the sub $20,000 to $25,000 market. Perhaps some compact EVs with just 100 miles of range. Maybe something like the BYD Dolphin perhaps. Yes, that could be a market. I mean, Nissan managed to sell about 15,000 Leafs a year in the US. Okay, that's not a massive number of sales, but it starts at $27,000. Oh, and eligible for a $7,500 tax credit too, so is already essentially $20,000. And that has 150 miles of range still. The Dolphin gets 130 miles of range EPA, but is over $20,000 excluding subsidies or importing to the US. Right, don't forget, there are already cheaper alternatives to Teslas that already don't sell well, and established brands. So who can say? Anyway, this will be something to look for, watching to what level the Chinese EVs really can ramp up, especially for their cars that do not have 200 miles of range, which may be adequate for some consumers, but then it might be so few that economies of scale become really hard, especially when you factor in service centres and infrastructure along with advertising. There is also one other major issue that the US might have with the Chinese EVs. Well, do you remember how the US banned Huawei phones because the CCP was supposedly listening to everyone? Well, guess what? These cars can listen and see everything you do too. They may have some major privacy issues that will be concerning for the US government, and they may even simply ban Chinese EVs as a result. That may be a bit extreme, but I do like to think of as many possibilities as I can. Anyway, I must say I was surprised and somewhat disappointed with some of the comments, but as I say, I'm not a cheerleader channel. I'm not here to simply agree with what other people say. I won't simply say, this person is smart because he thinks Tesla is going to be big, or this person is stupid because he thinks Tesla is going to fail. I make my own opinion on everything. Otherwise, what's the point of listening to me? I will only ever offer my own unique perspective on how I see things and back them up as much as I can. Okay, to summarize, if Chinese EVs do try and make themselves a decent market share in the US, either way, I think it will be difficult, and to be honest, I don't know how they can. Gasoline prices becoming absolutely crazy may be the most likely way, but even so, they're not making close to enough vehicles today, and they obviously need to ramp up, and Elon tells everyone just how hard ramping up is. And again, the Chinese are still not making EVs at a profit, so ramping up more could just mean a faster loss, especially if they have to drop the prices to compete in the US. It's not that I don't want them to succeed. I believe in the mission. I want as many EVs out there as possible, including legacy autos. I'm not trying to say I want it all to be Tesla. I really, truly don't want that. I think competition is imperative, as society needs choices in products to buy. But it doesn't change anything. China will still make as many EVs as they can and likely sell them. It's a big world, and they're targeting price points from $5,000 to $15,000 too. Tesla isn't even touching these markets until they bring out robotaxis. All I've been saying is that Chinese EVs might not be suitable for the US. I think there are much easier markets for the Chinese EVs. Anyway, that is my conclusion on the Chinese EVs. I think in light of all this, I need to reevaluate legacy autos again. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.